For more than 1,000 years, the British monarchy has survived war, revolution, scandal, and the slow grinding pressure of public opinion. It has buried kings, weathered abdications, and absorbed betrayals that would have shattered any ordinary family. But in the autumn of 2025, King Charles III did something that had no real precedent in modern royal history. He did not strip a title from a distant cousin or quietly retire an aging relative. He took the title of prince away from his own brother, a title Andrew had carried from the very moment he was born, a title that, until that day, almost everyone believed was untouchable. And here is the part that makes this so extraordinary. This was not forced on Charles by Parliament. It was not the result of a court verdict. It was a deliberate choice, made by a king who understood exactly what it would cost his family, his name, and the memory of his own mother. To understand why a monarch would dismantle his brother in public, you have to understand what he was really protecting. Because this was never only about Andrew. This was about the throne itself, and the son who will one day sit on it. Before we go any further, if you want the truth behind the headlines, the full story the tabloids only tell in fragments, make sure you subscribe, because we follow every twist in this saga as it unfolds. Now let's begin. To grasp how far Andrew fell, you first have to remember how high he once stood. He was not always the disgraced figure the world sees today. Andrew was the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, and for much of his life he was widely understood to be her favorite. He had something his older brother Charles, for all his seriousness, seemed to lack in the public eye. He had charm, swagger, and a war record. As a young man, Andrew served as a Royal Navy helicopter pilot during the Falklands conflict, flying missions that were genuinely dangerous. He came home a kind of hero. The press of the era nicknamed him in flattering terms, and for a time he was the glamorous prince, the dashing royal who seemed to embody a more modern, more daring version of the crown. When he married Sarah Ferguson in 1986, the wedding was a national celebration. He was made the Duke of York, one of the most historically significant titles in the royal gift, traditionally given to the monarch's second son. He took on royal duties, represented Britain abroad, and for years occupied a comfortable, well-funded place at the heart of the institution. He later served as a United Kingdom trade envoy, traveling the world, opening doors, shaking hands with the powerful. He had access, he had status, he had the protection that comes with being born into the most famous family on earth. And that protection, for a very long time, is exactly what shielded him. Because even as the rumors gathered, even as uncomfortable associations began to surface, Andrew remained insulated. He was the Queen's bour's son. He was a prince. The machinery of the monarchy bent to keep him standing. What changed, in the end, was not Andrew. What changed was that the machinery stopped bending, and the man who finally let it break was his own brother. The shadow that destroyed Andrew has a name, and that name is Jeffrey Epstein. For years, Andrew's friendship with the convicted sex offender hung over him like a storm that never quite passed. He insisted, repeatedly, that the relationship had been limited, that he had cut ties, that he had done nothing wrong. He has always denied any wrongdoing, and he continues to deny the most serious allegations made against him to this day. That denial matters, and it deserves to be stated plainly. But denial alone was never going to be enough, because the questions kept coming, and Andrew's own answers kept making things worse. The turning point that most people remember came in 2019, when Andrew sat down for a television interview that was meant to clear his name. Instead, it became one of the most disastrous public performances in royal history. He appeared evasive where he needed to be convincing, detached where he needed to be human. Rather than putting the controversy to rest, the interview poured fuel on it. Within days, Andrew stepped back from public royal duties. The dashing prince of the Falklands was gone, replaced by a man the institution increasingly wanted to keep out of sight. The legal pressure followed. In 2021, he was sued in New York by Virginia Giuffre, who alleged that she had been trafficked to him by Epstein when she was just 17 years old. Andrew denied the allegations. In early 2022, the case was settled out of court. He paid an undisclosed sum, continued to deny liability, but did release a statement acknowledging that Giuffre had been a victim of trafficking and of Epstein's abuse. For a while, it seemed that the settlement might draw a line under the matter. The Queen was still alive. The family closed ranks, as it always had. And Andrew, though diminished, retained his titles, his home, and his place. But a settlement is not the same as silence. The story was never truly over, it was only waiting, and when it returned with a force that even the monarchy could not absorb. The year 2025 is when the ground finally gave way beneath Andrew's feet. In April of that year, Virginia Giuffre died. Her family described her death as a suicide. She was a woman who had spent years fighting to be heard, who had become a symbol for survivors of trafficking around the world, and her death sent a shockwave through everyone who had followed her story. But it was what came after her death that proved decisive. Select your Yunan. 6 months later, In October of 2025, Giuffre's memoir was published. It carried her account into the world in her own words, at a moment when she could no longer be cross-examined, pressured, or doubted in person. The book detailed her alleged encounters and reignited public outrage on a scale that the earlier settlement had managed to contain. For the first time in years, the pressure was not coming from lawyers or tabloids alone. A committee in the United States released a cache of emails connected to Epstein's estate, and among them were messages involving Andrew. One of those emails appeared to flatly contradict the story he had told for years. He had long maintained that he had cut contact with Epstein at a certain point. The email suggested that the relationship had continued well beyond the date he claimed. In one message, sent after Giuffre had first spoken publicly to a newspaper, Andrew appeared to reassure Epstein, telling him not to worry, that they were in it together. Resurfaced correspondence painted a picture that was simply impossible to square with his public account. This was the moment the dam broke. It was no longer a matter of allegation against denial. It was a matter of Andrew's own words, in his own emails, undercutting the very defense he had built his survival upon. The British public had reached its limit. Members of Parliament began calling, openly and loudly, for Andrew to lose his titles and be removed from his home. The prospect of a full parliamentary debate over the conduct of a member of the royal family loomed, and that, for the Crown, was a nightmare scenario. Now, before we get to the decision itself, stay with me, because the part that truly matters, the reason this goes far beyond Andrew, comes near the end of this story. What Charles did next was not just punishment, it was strategy. And once you see the strategy, you will never look at this the same way again. When the pressure became unbearable, the response came in two stages, and the sequence tells you everything about how the monarchy thinks. First, there was an attempt at a softer solution. Andrew agreed to stop using his titles. The idea was that if he simply ceased to call himself the Duke of York, if he voluntarily set the styles aside, the storm might pass without the crown having to take dramatic formal action. It was a compromise designed to protect the institution while sparing it the spectacle of openly stripping a prince. It did not work. Far from quieting the calls for accountability, the half measure only sharpened them. Critics saw it for what it was, a gesture without substance, a way of appearing to act while changing nothing of legal weight. The voices in Parliament grew louder, the headlines kept coming, and it became clear that a voluntary arrangement, dependent on Andrew's own cooperation, would never be enough to draw the thickest possible line between him and the rest of the family. So Charles took the second step, the one with no going back. In late October of 2025, the king initiated a formal process to strip Andrew of his princely title and his other royal honors. This was not Andrew choosing to stop using a name. This was the sovereign, exercising the authority that flows from the crown, formally removing the recognition that gave those titles their meaning. The Duke of York was no more. The very designation of prince, held since the day of his birth, was withdrawn. From that point forward, the man the world had known as Prince Andrew would be known by a different name entirely. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Ning Fond, Edikan Becomes, Nundlefbes, Feynman Tuard, Formidable Dunlars Beshem Marspes, Dit Midoard Zespes, Fidirin Narabinda. Can seem like a small and bloodless thing, but this was the public unmaking of a royal identity. Every official record, every form of address, every ceremonial reference would now reflect a man who had been formally separated from the rank he was born into. And it was his own brother who signed off on the unmaking. There was no court order compelling it. There was no act of parliament forcing his hand. It was a decision, made at the very top, by a king who had concluded that the cost of protecting his brother had finally become greater than the cost of destroying him. But titles, as it turned out, were only the beginning, because there was still the matter of the house. If you want to understand why public anger reached the level it did, you have to understand Royal Lodge. This was the home at the center of the storm, a sprawling 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, a Grade 2 listed property that Andrew had occupied since 2004. To ordinary people watching from the outside, it became a symbol of everything that felt wrong about the situation. A man at the center of such serious allegations, living in such grandeur, seemingly untouched, and then journalists uncovered the details of how he held the property, and the symbol became a scandal in its own right. The arrangement was extraordinary. Andrew had effectively secured the lease through what observers described as a peppercorn rent, a symbolic arrangement with no meaningful financial value. He had paid around £1 million up front, and committed to carrying out roughly £7.5 million of refurbishment work, in place of paying ongoing rent. The refurbishment was reportedly completed within the first couple of years of the lease. In practical terms, for a property of staggering value, he was not paying rent in the way an ordinary tenant ever could. For a public already furious about the Epstein revelations, this was gasoline on a fire. The optics were impossible to defend. While questions about his conduct went unanswered, here he was, in a 30-room mansion, on terms that no one outside the royal family could ever hope to access. The calls were no longer just for his titles, they were for his keys. Punctual. Charles moved to take them. The king revoked the lease and set in motion Andrew's removal from Royal Lodge, and the manner in which it happened revealed just how much the institution wanted this chapter closed. Andrew was removed from the mansion in early February of 2026, and crucially, this happened before his intended new residence was even ready for him to occupy. Sources connected to Andrew complained that the eviction had been unnecessarily hasty, that it was carried out in a rush to satisfy a hostile media rather than out of any practical necessity. From their perspective, he was being pushed out the door before there was a proper door to walk through on the other side. Where he went says everything about his new place in the world. Even Hanamaim did not move to another grand estate of his own. He was relocated to the king's private Sandringham estate in Norfolk. He initially stayed at one of the more modest farmhouse properties there, before eventually settling into another renovated farm residence, once the work was complete. The prince, who had lived in a 30-room mansion in Windsor, now occupied a farmhouse on his brother's land. His presence carefully managed, his independence quietly stripped away along with his name. And he was not the only one who paid a price. Sarah Ferguson, his former wife, who had continued to be associated with the style of Duchess of York, also saw her standing dismantled in the fallout. The unmaking of Andrew rippled outward, pulling down those whose status had been tied to his. An entire branch of the family's public identity was being dismantled, piece by piece, in full view of the country. But it is one small, quiet detail from the months that followed that may capture the human reality of this more than any document or declaration, and it tells you that this rupture was not just institutional, it was deeply, painfully personal. There came a point, sometime after the eviction, when King Charles returned from an official visit to the United States and chose to spend time at one of the farmhouse properties on the Sandringham estate. By this point, Andrew was living in his own farmhouse on that same estate. The two residences were separated by a single field and a short walk, more than 10 minutes apart. Two brothers, sons of the same queen, the king of the United Kingdom and the man he had stripped of everything, were within half a mile of one another. And they did not meet. There is something almost unbearably sad in that image. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a furious row, just silence and distance, and the deliberate choice not to cross a single field. It was the clearest possible illustration of the rift. Charles had not merely removed Andrew's titles and his home. He had drawn a line that even physical closeness could not erase. Reports suggested that other members of the family felt the strain acutely. The brother's younger sibling was said to be deeply unsettled by the whole affair, caught between the allegations on one side and genuine worry about Andrew's well-being on the other, as a police investigation into matters surrounding him reportedly continued. This is the human cost the headlines tend to skip past. A family fractured, a mother's favorite son cast out by the heir she raised to take her place, a king who, by all accounts, took no pleasure in any of it, but who had decided that some things matter more than brotherly loyalty. And in the months that followed, even the royal finances came under fresh scrutiny, with official transparency reports examining the arrangements that had surrounded properties like Royal Lodge. The institution was, quite deliberately, opening its books, showing the public that the era of quiet protection was over. Which brings us, at last, to the question that explains everything. Why? Why would a king do this to his own brother? Why endure the pain, the spectacle, the permanent fracture in his family? The answer is the reason this story matters far beyond Andrew, and it has a single name attached to it: William. Here is what the constitutional experts understood from the very beginning, even when the public saw only scandal and punishment. The monarchy that Charles inherited is not the monarchy his mother ruled. For 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II commanded a level of personal reverence so profound that to criticize the institution often felt like criticizing her directly. That reverence acted as a shield. It protected the whole family, Andrew included, from the full weight of accountability. As long as the Queen lived, people were reluctant to push too hard. Charles never had that shield, and he knows it. He came to the throne as an older man, ruling a public that no longer grants automatic deference, in an age where every privilege is questioned and every scandal magnified. Experts in constitutional law have described what is happening as a fundamental transition, the monarchy slowly becoming more like an ordinary public institution, one that can be scrutinized, held to account, and forced to answer to the people and their representatives. Charles understands that the crown now survives, not by standing above the public, but by being seen to be accountable to it. And that is the key to Andrew. By drawing the thickest possible line between Andrew and the rest of the family, Charles was not just responding to a scandal, he was making a statement about what kind of monarchy the future will be. He was demonstrating that no one, not even the son of a beloved queen, not even his own brother, is beyond the reach of accountability. He was, in the words of those who study these things, getting the house in order, but getting the house in born. Order for whom? This is the part that ties it all together. Charles is in his late 70s. He has been undergoing treatment for cancer. He knows, better than anyone, that his reign is a bridge, not a destination. The throne he sits on today will one day belong to his elder son. And the single most important thing Charles can do for William is to hand him a monarchy that is clean, stable, and free of the kind of festering scandal that could poison the next reign before it even begins. Imagine the alternative. Imagine William ascending the throne years from now, with Andrew still a prince, still in his mansion, still a walking reminder of the institution's willingness to protect its own at any cost. Every Epstein revelation, every uncomfortable question, would have landed on William's reign, dragging the new king into a scandal he did not create. By acting now, by absorbing the pain and the controversy himself, Charles is clearing the board. He is taking the hit so that his son will not have to. He is removing the threat to the throne, while it is still his own throne to defend. Then, that is why this was never simply about Andrew. Andrew was the symptom. The disease was the danger that an unresolved scandal posed to the future of the crown itself. And Charles, the father, made a calculation that the king could not avoid. He chose the institution over his brother. He chose his son's future over his mother's favorite. He chose the throne over the family, because in the end, the throne is the family's only real inheritance. So where does that leave us? Andrew is no longer a prince. He is no longer the Duke of York. He has lost his mansion, his titles, and much of the protection that defined his entire life. He lives now on his brother's land, his name rewritten across every official record, a cautionary tale about what happens when the shield of monarchy is finally withdrawn. He maintains his innocence regarding the most serious allegations, and that remains his right. But his place at the heart of the royal story is over, and the monarchy he leaves behind is changed. Wounded, yes, diminished by the spectacle of a king dismantling his own brother, but also, in a strange way, strengthened. Because Charles has proven something that the institution badly needed to prove, that it can hold its own to account, that it can put duty above blood, that the line between the family and the crown, when it has to be drawn, will be drawn, no matter how much it hurts. This is the lesson buried beneath all the headlines. Within the House of Windsor, blood will always matter, but blood does not rule, the crown rules. And when a king is forced to choose between the brother he grew up with and the son he is preparing to leave the throne to, the choice, however painful, is already made. The future always wins. William's reign, when it comes, will begin on cleaner ground because of the price his father was willing to pay today. The dashing prince of the Falklands, the Queen's favorite son, the Duke of York, all of it, gone, not taken by a court, not removed by Parliament, but withdrawn by the quiet, deliberate hand of a brother who understood that protecting the throne meant letting go of the man beside him. That is the real story of how King Charles stripped Andrew of everything. And it is, in the end, a story not about destruction, but about a king securing the future of the crown for the son who will one day wear it. Wow, the control. Watching. If this gave you a clearer picture of what really happened, and why it matters so much more than the headlines suggest, do us a favor and hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe to Palace Files, because the story of this monarchy is far from over, and we will be here for every chapter. We'll see you in the next